Hey y'all, it's Farley with Writer's Edge Podcast, and today I'm get to have a conversation with Wendy Murdoch of the Murdoch Method and FOOT Equine Pads. So welcome to the podcast / video chat, Wendy.
Happy to be here.
Great. So I was reading your bio and your journey and kind of give me your backstory of how you got to what you're doing today.
So in 1984, I was a graduate and I was managing an event barn, and I wanted to be an event rider. And so there was a horse there that I knew could rear, but I got on him anyway. And he reared up and fell over backward and rolled over me and punched my femur through the hip socket. So I wound up in the hospital. And that 15 seconds changed my life. So while I was in the hospital, I found out about Linda Tellington-Jones, and a friend of mine gave me a little book called Illusions by Richard Bach. And it's about everything's already here. We just have to focus our lens to see it. So the year after my accident, I started training with Linda Tellington-Jones, and I met Sally Swift in '86 and studied with her. And so I dropped out of grad school. I got my master's, but I dropped out of my doctoral degree and pursued team and centered riding. And of course, Linda exposed me to the Feldenkrais method, which is finding new possibilities of movement, which riders need. So if the rider doesn't have the ability to move in a certain way, the horse can't do what they ask, right? Because it's our body that's communicating to the horse. So in 2001, I started taking the Feldenkrais training, and I've studied the Feldenkrais method for 16 years. And Feldenkrais, he was always looking at possibilities and new options and ways to do things. So I carried that through in my teaching. And that's really where Surefoot came from. It was this idea of, I do a lesson with students called the artificial floor, or grounding the foot, where I place a board under their foot, they take it out of the stirrup, and it changes their whole sensory system in their leg, and their leg gets longer, and the stirrup feels totally different. And I've been doing this since 2002, and I was trying to figure out, how could I give the horse a similar experience of feeling the ground in a new way? So that's kind of puttering around in the background. And then I saw a horse that I started working with him 3 years prior, and he had been lame. And I gave him Feldenkrais lessons, the horse. The owner had to come by herself if I was going to work with her, because he would not let me work with her. I had to work with him. So for 3 years, I gave him lessons. And then I know, it's really funny. And then one day she came and she had changed the saddle because she wanted a jumping saddle. And the saddle turned out to be crooked, and it had put pressure on the back right corner of his back. And he came in, and he was very short in the right hind leg. And so I watched him, and she had her dressage saddle there. So we switched it back, but he was still lame, short. I won't say lame, but not moving evenly. So that night I went home, and I was talking to Dr. Joyce Harmon, who's one of my best friends, and she's a well-known holistic veterinarian. And this was in 2012, May of 2012. And she wanted to stand at her computer instead of sit. So she was talking about having a standing desk, and that was before all these fancy standing desks. And she wanted some kind of a pad to stand on. And so while we're talking, she told me about how they were using different kinds of balance pads and things for dogs. And so I'm tapping away on my laptop while I'm talking to her on the phone, and I see all these dogs balancing on different things. And so I said to her, "Do you think it would work for a horse?" And she said, "Well, I don't know, but when you do it, time it for 15 seconds. And so I went into my shed, and I just grabbed something I could find in my shed, and I drove to the lesson, and my students are always used to me doing strange things. And I walked up and I said, "I'm going to put this pad underneath your horse's back foot, and we'll see what happens." I literally time it for 15 seconds, and the horse walks off, and he's completely different. So twice in my life, 15 seconds has totally changed my life. And that was 7.5 years ago. I've designed horse durable pads because what I was using wasn't designed for horses, which are big, right? And now Surefoot is around the world. It's in, I don't know how many countries. It's in Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Europe, Canada and the United States. And it's amazing to me how every time I see a horse, I'm still just as intrigued by this as I was the first time. I'm just still as like amazed at the changes, at the rapidity of the changes, at the horse's responses. And what I tell people is we don't fully understand how it's working because we don't know what's happening in the horse's brain, but it's so obvious that it is profound to the horse because the horses show us this. It's just time after time after time, those horses stand on a pad and they walk off and they're softer, they're more relaxed, they're more balanced, they're more comfortable, they're more interactive with people. It's so meaningful to them. And while I would love to understand how it's working, it's clear that it is working and that the horses really benefit from this process.
Well, and I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, you can't placebo effect a horse. Like, you can't walk up to the horse and say, right, hey, Charlie, I'm going to put this pad on your foot and you're just going to feel amazing. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you're right. And so, the first horse, it was a warm blood. He would only let me do his back feet, but big changes. And then the second horse was a quarter horse that had done Western pleasure, and the woman wanted to use him for eventing, and he would only let me do his front feet. And he had a beautiful round canter at the end of the lesson. Then the next horse was a halflinger, and he was around in the canter. And the owner of the halflinger is a good friend of mine, Catherine Wyckoff, who's also a Feldenkrais practitioner. And she's been using the pads with her halflinger now for over 7 years. He still enjoys them. Things change, like she doesn't use the same pads every day, or she might do a different order, or maybe not for a couple of days, but he still enjoys Surefoot. And so horses can benefit from one session. They can benefit from long-term. If you change something, you can rebalance them. They get an injury, you can help them recover. Because with injuries, we compensate. And when you think about a horse only has 4 legs and he compensates and 25%, that's one leg, is injured, he now puts that weight on the other 3 legs. And what I tell people is, don't worry about the injured leg right now, but support the other legs because they're taking more strain. And then when the vet approves that, this leg is healed enough, then you can go work with that leg. But in the meantime, we have to support the rest of the horse because he's now trying to figure out how to balance on 3 legs. And so, whether it's that your horse is anxious for the farrier or has had an injury, or say you're having an issue with training, what I find is that if I use the pads in my lesson and I help the horse just ground a bit more, and I say that because you see them, they take a huge breath. That can happen in 3 to 10 seconds. Their eyes soften, their neck lowers, and they relax. And then when you go again, they're in a better state to figure out what's going on. So when I look at a horse, I think that what is the biggest single thing that prevents a horse from doing what we want? Tension, anxiety. And so if I can help that horse feel better, more grounded, and able to assess his world, then he can process that information that I'm offering him. And in so many cases, the horse already knows what we want. Like, he's already been in a trailer or he's already done a canter depart, but the tension is blocking him from being able to do it. So I was just up in Canada at the Icelandic Horse Farm with Robin Hood, who's Linda Tellington-Jones' sister. She's a team trainer. And we had this off-the-track thoroughbred, Bob. I just love Bob. And he came over and he's high-headed and he stands at a really racehorse type posture, neck really high, kind of unbalanced in his feet. And in the before, we asked her to try to canter on the right lead, and she tried several times and he could not get it. So we did Surefoot, not too much give in the beginning. And then the next day she came back and his neck was lower. She said he stood more quietly. He walked over easier. And every time she asked for the right lead canter, he got it. 3 times, 3 asks, 3 times, perfect canter transition, no hesitation. It wasn't that Bob didn't understand right lead, but he couldn't get there because he'd get anxious and he'd get tense and then he couldn't do it. And so I think of this kind of like the kid in class that's been called on, hey, you got the answer to the math question. And he's like, oh no, everybody's looking at me, and they get tense, right? I mean, people have the same reaction. Mm-hmm. But when we feel confident, when we feel secure, we can answer the question, right? And that's really the the difference in Bob, the owner was amazed because the third time she came over, he stood quietly to be tacked up. He picked grass, like nibbled the grass on the way over, which he would have never done. And he walked over and he stood there and he was like totally chill, and his neck was down and his posture was really changing. I put a bunch of those pictures up on my FOOT Equine Facebook page. You've probably taken a look at them.
Yes.
But, the difference in his posture was so dramatic. Yeah. And the thing is, he didn't stay perfectly okay, right? You can't expect a habit to disappear in one session. But when you see that kind of change, you're putting information into the system, and his system is registering ease. And that's what we have to realize, is that the nervous system is designed to sense ease. It's designed to sense when everything's okay, when I feel safe and I feel grounded. But if you haven't felt that way in a long time, you don't know where that feeling is. You're like kind of stuck in this habit of anxiety. And with Bob, we could see that he would find that ease and that grounding. And while he wasn't perfect, he started looking for that more than the anxiety. And so we could see in just the few sessions that there was a change that over, now he's processing it, and his outline was changing, and he was sensing the ground, and he was standing square, all these things that we recognize as good posture and balance. And the more he feels that, the more he's going to want to feel that, because it feels good to him. His nervous system recognizes this, wow, this is okay. Because horses are designed, you watch them in the field. They spend most of their time hanging out with their buddies and grazing and their neck down, not in this posture of anxiety. But we have to offer that to them in a way that's meaningful to them. And this is where, when I first started with Surefoot, I was like, I need to understand this thing. How is this working? So I called on my friends. I called Dr. Bob Bowker and Dr. Hillary Clayton and Dr. Joyce Harmon and Dr. Rosemary Ganser and Donna and all these veterinarians, and Dr. Stephen Peters is a human neuropsychologist. And I'm like, what's going on? And everybody acknowledges that it's profound. And what Dr. Bowker says is that the foot's a sensory organ. And, that's a simple statement, but it's a powerful statement, that hoof has to feel the ground and recognize, is it hard? Is it soft? Is it going to give out from underneath me? Am I secure? Does it feel like good grass? Is there water nearby? Is there a vibration? So that foot is picking up all this information and sending it up to the brain so that the horse can organize his entire body over those tiny little feet. And we get on their back and we run across the field, and there might be holes, there might be rocks, there might, I could take people on horseback safari to Kenya, and we're galloping across the Mara, and these horses stay upright and carry us. And when you realize it's that foot that's so critical to send that information to the brain, and how this feedback system is so exquisite, it's so rapid, it's so important, and that's what we're affecting. We're affecting the sensory organ of the foot, and that's feeding back to the brain, and the brain is getting a different, it's obvious the brain chemicals are changing, the nervous system is shifting, and the horse calms down, feels secure. A side benefit, and this is, there's so many interesting things that happen, but a side benefit is the horse recognizes who brought them the pads. And the biggest problem my students have is that the horses don't want to leave me because I've brought them the pads. And so then when the students bring the pads to the horse goes, oh, you're doing this too. You're making me feel good. And suddenly their ears are up. They're looking for their people. They come to the gate. They are involved in the process. They're curious about it. And we have an engaged horse that's feeling good, that wants to check it out, that's curious. And it's such a different feeling to feel the horse go, hey, you know what? You did something that makes me feel good. You gave me a voice. You let me choose which pad, how long I want to stand on it. You didn't force me to stand on it. You made an offer. And I get to tell you what I like. I get to tell you, I like firm better than hard, or I prefer a slant, or please do my front feet, or maybe, a diagonal pair, or maybe not today. And so this is the unique thing about the Surefoot program, is that the horses get to vote. They get to choose, and they show us what they like. So we make the offer, and then they show us, and then we respond and facilitate their process, because then we're having a dialogue. And the horses recognize when we say, hey, what would you like? Which pad today? and it shifts their perspective. I can't even describe it. Like, I had this horse Shiner, and he's a little Mustang, and he was up at the Icelandic horse farm, and he's been there for a while and kind of gets forgotten a little bit. And he came from the range, and he has a pair of legs that you could barely pick up when you went to his feet. And at first he's just kind of standing there like, all right, we're going to be ridden. But the next day he's like, hey, do I get to go do this again? And his ears were up and his face was bright, and I could start to pick up the other feet. And then the next day I set the pads out in a circle, and he's like looking at me, and I'm standing in the middle of the circle, and he's like, what pad are you going to walk up to that I'm going to get to stand on? And so I'd start walking to a pad, and he'd trot over because he had a problem with trying to get into a hippie hop canter. He'd trot over to the pad, and he'd stand there, and he's like, you're going to do this, right? I'm like, yeah. And I put his foot on the pad. And then I'd go back to the middle, and he'd have a trot. It's like musical chairs, right? And he trotted around, beautiful trot. And now he's engaged, and he's interested, and he's trotting beautifully. And then I'd start to walk to a pad, and he's like, oh, I know which one she's going to. And he'd trot over there, and I'd put his foot on a pad. But this was a horse that was like, all right, they're coming to ride me again, in the beginning. And suddenly he's like, oh yeah, let's go, let's do this. And it made it fun for him. And when we can get the horses to be engaged like that, everybody benefits. It's fun, it's interesting, it's curious, they learn better. There's proof that if something is novel and curious and interesting, person is going to learn in up like less than 10 times. Less than 10 times doing something, they're going to learn. But if it's not, it takes like 100 times. Maybe I don't have my numbers quite right, but a lot longer when it's not that way. So if we can get our horses interested and curious, just think that now we harness their learning potential and their curiosity and their problem-solving ability to figure out the answer to the question. So that's just one way we can use Surefoot to make horses more engaged and more curious and feel better. But like I said, there's so many things. We have farriers now using the pads with horses that are uncomfortable so that the horse feels comfort, because when a horse is sore and a farrier's trying to work on him, he picks up a foot, and now the horse has to stand on the sore foot. He's going to be uncomfortable, and he can only tell us in his own way of pulling the leg back or, being difficult. But if we make the horse comfortable by offering him a pad, we make the farrier and the horse safer, so the farrier can do his job, the horse can be relaxed, everybody benefits. And I literally have people coming up to me and saying, I did 2 sessions of Surefoot, and my horse doesn't have to be tranquilized for the farrier anymore. That's huge. It's
Absolutely.
Huge for everyone, right? The decrease of the stress for the farrier, for the owner, for the horse. And I have a person down in Texas that's using Surefoot, and she called me yesterday. She was so excited. There's a horse it's a rescue horse, and they went to pick it up, and its neck was looking really compressed, and they thought they were going to have to x-ray it. And they had a terrible time loading it in the trailer, and they weren't sure they were going to get it loaded. And so she got extra people there. But the day before, she did Surefoot with the horse. And she said when she got there the next day to load this horse in the trailer, his neck looked like a foot longer. He was relaxed, and he walked on the trailer. I mean, it's if we can help our horses feel grounded and secure, I know it's crazy stuff, right? One session.
Yes.
It's isn't that what we want? Don't we want a horse that's recognizing that we're there to help them feel better, and that they're there to understand what we want? And so, I know people, I've been doing this for 7 years, and when I started, people really thought I was crazy. But now that I have, on a daily basis, I have veterinarians buying pads off my website, calling me about how to use the Surefoot system. Colorado State University has been using Surefoot pads for at least 2 years now, and they show them in their workshops. And these veterinarians are like, wow, this is awesome. And they call me up, and I have people I have a whole team of physical therapists in Germany and in Austria and Switzerland that use Surefoot as part of their therapy, as part of their treatment. It's I have a great therapist down in Australia, Robin, and she got her pads just before the Shahrazad endurance ride, which is a 500K ride. They do 80Ks for 4 days, no, 400K ride, 80 Ks, 5 days. And she's been doing this ride as a physical therapist for 6 years, and this was her 7th year. And for 6 years, she's seen a compression pattern because they're on tar roads and they're pounding. And so the soreness starts in the withers, and pretty soon they're starting to look really uncomfortable. So she got her pads just before the ride. She took them to the ride. She did 2 to 3 minutes per horse at the rest. At the end of the ride, she saw none of the compression patterns that she'd seen for 6 years. None. I know. It's amazing that when we can offer the system a chance to recover or another idea, the horse responds. And I just can't even tell you, most people can't fathom this until they see it. You know, when you watch a horse and you put a pad underneath their foot and there's a breathing change in 3 to 10 seconds, you see eye blinks, ear wiggles, head drop, muzzle wiggles, head shakes, huge breath, and the horse just like lets go. And and then you walk them off. So you walk them in between being on the pads, because the idea is not to live on pads, but to go back to the earth. And I do this with riders on their back because I want the rider's perception to change in relation to the horse. So many riders go, oh, my horse always falls in on the shoulder, or my horse won't take this lead, or my horse won't, yield his hindquarters. And then you do the pads and they feel the horse think about his body, and they feel their rib cage expand. And they walk off, and it's like you could feel the horse looking at his foot as he places it on the ground, like in his mind. And you suddenly realize he's really thinking about how he's placing his feet. And suddenly he stands square, right? Or you ask him to canter depart, and it's right there. And the horses are just waiting for us to talk to them in something that's meaningful to them. They're just waiting for us to recognize that they can make a change if we offer the information in something that makes sense to them, that they experience for themselves. And we're all subject to gravity. So no matter the size of the horse, he's got these 4 little feet. That's what he has to balance his body over and his rider over. And those feet have to land in a way that's secure and grounded so that he can be confident and look at his world and go, I can assess that over there. I don't have to fall through my shoulder because I can get my foot squarely underneath me. I can look at it. I can decide I'm safe and let it go, take a breath, drop my neck and go, hey, life's cool, and just walk on. And, the other really beautiful thing, I know I'm going on and on and on.
Oh, you're doing great. I'm loving this.
You can combine Surefoot with massage therapy, with physical therapy, with training, with working with the farrier. So it can go with all these other techniques. And in and of itself, the first time, pretty much you want to just let the horse have just that experience because it's so much input. But then you can combine it with other ideas. You combine it with the Tellington-Jones method, combine it with Masterson method, combine it with massage. We have physios in Germany that put the horse on the full physio pad. It's a large pad, and do their treatments. And they say that they're so much more effective because the horse is already letting down and the system is already softening. And when we look at that foot, we've got acupuncture points all around the coronet band, so we're affecting the acupuncture meridians. We've got fascia, so we're affecting the fascial system. We've got the nerve cells in the foot, the raphenes and the pacinium. They sense vibration. They orient the horse. You've got the proprioceptors that are in the joints that tell you where you are in space. That's how you grab the candy bar in the back seat while you're driving your car at 60 miles an hour, because you can feel where your hand is. All these systems we're affecting, but we're also affecting the neurochemical system in the brain, and we can tell that from the facial muscles. The eye softening, the ears blinking, the head dropping, the lips wiggling. That's all affecting the sympathetic nervous system. So we see the horses, if they're lethargic and they're low tone, they come up. If we see horses that are too high in sympathetic, fight and flight, they come down. Because ideally we will be in this middle place. Like if you're going to call into action, you need your sympathetic system to move, right? And if you're going to stand quietly, you need your parasympathetic to rest. And there's a range that we want to work in where things are going up and down, and that's like the normal range. If it gets too low, we're in freeze, right? We're in depression. If it's too high, we're in fight and flight and fool around. And so if we can normalize this system and get horses here in the middle, that's the ideal. that's where we function best. That's where horses function best. It's not a question of no sympathetic, otherwise you can't go into action, but also this blending, this give and take of the systems so that we can quietly act instead of react or just shut down. And I find there's a lot of horses that people think are okay, but they're really in a state of shutdown. My friend Robin called the word slush, like freeze would be locked up, can't get in the trailer, legs stiff. Slush is, I'm compliant, I'll do everything you say, but I'm not engaged. I'm not interested in what we're doing. I'm not involved in what we're doing. I'm just going through the motions. You know, a lot of people at work that do that too, right? Yeah. And so we're looking for the horse to be interested, engaged, participating, willing to make mistakes. Mistakes are mistakes, right? Mistakes. And we all make mistakes. We as humans working with our horses do, horses make them. But when they recognize that it's simply a mistake, right? You just didn't get it quite right. It's not that it's the end of the world. You're not going to die. You're not going to get yelled at. You're not going to get screamed at. You just need to, like, let's see if we can do it again. And then mistakes become learning. And that's really the power of this. It's that you can make a mistake and the horse goes, oh, it's okay. I know you didn't mean that, right? Or he makes a mistake and you can go, oh, let me help you settle. Let me help you come down. I will tell you a funny story. I have a dressage rider over in Europe. And when they go to the shows now, blue is his favorite, the soft. And they go to the ring and they hold up the soft pad outside the arena. And the horse looks over and sees the soft pad and goes, and then he goes in and I know it's crazy. And he shows, it just helps him relax that little bit to perform. But you'll start to see, I have Mustangs, a Mustang that does that. He goes up to his pad and he just, okay, I find that comfort that I need. I can self-regulate. And so I think of it as like, we need the exposure, and this is true of horses and people. So I don't see that we learn any differently, actually. The systems are basically the same in the brain. We have an experience. You have the horse stand on the pad for a few seconds and you walk them off. And the walk-off is important because it lets the system process that piece of information. So I think of it as like I've gathered a little packet of information, and now I'm chewing on it as I walk away, and I go, okay. And then I go back and you do it again, and then I'm like, wow, okay, that's a little different. What's that? Oh, okay. And you walk off and you go, now how does that feel? Oh, right. Okay. And then the really important moment is when you put them away for the day. So, even a short session, 10 minutes, and then putting them away, we do it and they do it. We process in that rest. We replay what's happened in the day. Dr. Peters talks about that the lick and chew is dopamine, but if you wait a little longer, you'll see that horse or the person replaying the idea in their mind. And you can see it, like you'll see the head come up a little bit, and then the eyes will blink and the neck comes back down. And then you'll see it happen again and several times. And during those moments, we're getting serotonin, your feel-good hormones, right? The stuff we give people Prozac to get, right? And during that process, we get what's called dendritic scaffolding building. So now we're making these little connections between these ideas, and the neurons start to make the dendrites that connect. And so, like, when you look at something and you go, okay, that's a ball, and I've seen a ball before, and what's that over there? It's a round thing, it's a different shape, it's in a different, oh, that's a ball. So I can associate that thing over there with this thing over here, because I form these dendrites that give me an idea about my world. But if a horse is stressed, if he's trained in fear, if he's learned helplessness, been shut down, he can't make those associations. There's this one thing, all right, that it's round, okay, I gotta stand here, and you're gonna like make me stand here, and okay, I gotta do that. And then I go over there, and here's this other thing, and I can't associate the two things because I haven't learned. I've just complied. And this is where I don't believe in desensitization. I believe in education. And if I show you this thing over here, and then I show you, hey, look, here's another idea, and it's similar, and you make those dendritic connections, now you can make sense of your world, and you can go, oh, that thing over there, that's similar to something else I know. and I know that was okay, I'm okay. But if I desensitize, now it's like, you just have to stand here while I do this thing, or you get exposed to, but that doesn't mean you learned. You just tolerated it. You went into freeze or slush. And so when I show you something else, you can't make the association. You can't recognize that's the same similar thing. And so this is where, when we start to understand learning, and we learn in such a similar way to horses. I mean, when you look, that's why I love Stephen Peters' talk, because he's a human neuropsychologist and he's looking at the horse brain. We have the same neurochemicals. We have the same parts of the brain. We've got a motor cortex. That's movement. We learn in movement. That's what we spent all those years as a kid doing. Crawling, standing, running, playing ball. It's what kids need to do. That's how we learn. That's how we develop our brain. That's how we develop our motor skills. And we have a cerebellum. We store movement patterns. If you learn to ride a bicycle, you can get on a bicycle, even if you're 69, even if you haven't ridden for a while, you might be a little rusty, you're going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. A horse is movement pattern. Language is in another part of the brain. So language is not associated with motor movement, right? And so when we get older and we try to think, and this is my riders, right? My adult riders, it's like, can you tell me the words? It's like, no, you need to feel the movements. We need to give you new ideas and things to experience and experiment with, so that you feel, when you do this, this happens. When you do this, this happens. But we learn in movement. And so that's where that's where the Feldenkrais comes in. And I take people back to the idea of feeling possibilities of movement, learning new possibilities, so that they have choices, so that they can pick the thing they need in the moment, so that the horse has choices. He can pick what he needs to do in the moment. I need to be able to stand here, or really I do need to move because that thing's gotten a little too close, right? But I can do that in a confident way because I feel secure in my body. I feel grounded in my feet. I'm able to evaluate what I'm looking at instead of like leaning over and falling. And now I'm running through my shoulder and somebody's grabbed my head and now I'm falling faster, right? I mean, this is so many times what happens is when a horse moves his 40-pound head at the end of a 3-foot lever arm to look at something, this whole weight shifts. When it shifts, does he lean through the shoulder, or can he keep his feet square in his balance while he turns his head and neck? If he leans and then something startles him, he's gone. But if he can turn his head and keep his feet grounded and square, he can evaluate, just like a person. So, like my example for people is, lean over, like over to one side. And now I'm going to come at you. And what are you going to do? You're going to fall sideways, right? And now if I grab your head and hold onto your head, you're going to fall faster. And now you're scrambling to get your feet underneath you. And it's like the little kid on the tricycle going downhill and the feet come off the pedals and everything's flying because he lost his balance. Let's show the horse where his balance is. Let's show him how to stand on his feet. Let's make sure his feet are secure, that he's got a good foot. Let's make sure that he feels square. And this is where I find my calmness. It's like a person. When you feel grounded on your feet, you take a breath. It's innate to the nervous system. And so for me, it's like all of these ideas, all of my training and the Feldenkrais, it all comes down to, if I can feel balanced and secure, I can evaluate my world, I can feel safe. If I can't find that balance, and I'm not going to be secure, I'm going to be anxious, I'm going to be nervous, I'm going to feel threatened, I'm going to be, like, what do I do now? And so whether it's a person, and I put people on the Surefoot pads in my clinics all the time and help them feel secure. And then they take a breath. And it's so interesting because they take a breath, they explore the pads. They don't lick and chew quite the same way, but you can see the eye blinks and the facial muscles, right? For me, is the difference is the horse has an encapsulated hoof. And so it's slightly different in the way it responds. And like, I've literally had horses go from rearing to grazing in 3.5 minutes with only standing on the pad for 3 seconds. Like, stood on the pad, reared up, walked back, stood on the pad, pushed sideways, walked back, stood on the pad, dropped his neck, walked back, stood on the pad, grazing the dirt. 3.5 minutes, most of it walking, about 3 seconds on the pad. I don't understand that. I've asked Stephen Peters about that. He can't explain it to me, but it was in front of 300 people in an expo, right? There's no placebo effect.
Nope.
And so we don't have to understand how it works. And it's an offer. Is it going to work for every horse? No. Are some horses just going to outright reject it? Yes. Are some horses never going to want to get off the pads? Yes. Will it solve everything? No. Does it help us diagnose things? Well, I can't call it diagnosis because I'm not a vet. But does it give us clues so we can be the detective and we watch the horse and we go, wow, look at the sway pattern and he only sways one way. Or look at how he rocks on that foot. Wow, maybe that's why he goes for the shoulder or can't canter or doesn't turn right. It's not about not complying to what you ask. It's about, is he in a position of potential movement so that he can respond to the request rather than react? And so for me, Surefoot is a way for people to start seeing their horse and observing with new eyes and recognizing that the horse isn't trying to do this to you, that it's not about who wins. It's about, why does my horse do this? Because he's not balanced and secure, doesn't feel safe. How can I help this horse feel safe? How can I help him feel balanced? How can I help him not need to move and walk into my space because he lost his balance and fell forward? And that's where we look at things in a whole different light and recognize that this is a conversation, it's a dialogue, it's an opportunity for me to offer something to my horse and say, what would you like? What do you need? How can I help you? And they respond like crazy. They're like, if I was to give them, you're asking me? You want to know what I want? You're like, it's okay to feel good. And it's like, my students all complain, the horses don't want to leave you. I'm like, that's not my problem. It's because they recognize that. So, and it's like I said, until you see it, it's really hard to believe. But that's why I'm working on, just like on my Facebook page, I keep posting videos and pictures, and I have people go, oh, this is, crazy stuff. Well, the more that this is going on, the more vets are participating, physiotherapists, horse owners. What do you got to lose is really what one of my students said is, it's, what do you got to lose offering this to your horse? Nothing, right? Okay, so a couple of bucks, maybe the cost of one time to the farrier if you get shoes on your horse, or one nice dinner. For one nice dinner, you can offer your horse something that you can give him on a daily basis to make him feel good, improve your relationship, and really do something that's profound to your horse.
Yes, yes. So Wendy, tell me, and then I'm going to ask this with a grain of salt, because the answer is always, it depends. But kind of tell me tell me kind of your baseline, because you've got to have a baseline of where you kind of start, like kind of your protocol, like basic, again, every horse is an individual, every rider is an individual, it all depends, but kind of when you are going to treat a horse, what's kind of your initial basic game plan, and then you monitor and adjust from the feedback you get.
Yep. So I start with the harder pad and move soft, because if it's too soft and it can scare them at first, right? So the hard pad gives slowly, it gives the heat and pressure, it's not going to spring back. So I start with the hard pad. I walk up to them, I present the pad. If they're already running backwards, I got to slow down, break it down, and that's kind of like a separate deal. But the majority of horses, the bell curve, I walk up, I let them sniff the pad. I might walk away and let them think about it and do that a couple of times. And then obviously unmounted and on a lead, never on cross ties in case they react. So in an open space where they have room to move, I'll drop the pad and I watch to see, did it startle him, right? Or is he like, hey, what's that? And sticks his nose on it. So if he's a little startled, I might kick it away a couple of times and let him look at it and see that it's okay. It's not gonna threaten me. And then I use my foot and I kick it toward them, and I keep one hand on my back so that I keep my hands away from the hoof so I stay safe. And I slide my other hand down the leg and I ask the leg to come up. So many people get invested with, be a good horse and pick up your foot. But I'm already gathering information. Does the foot come up when I ask the first time? When it comes up, is it stiff? Does he push it forward, pull it back? Does he need to slam it back down? I already know a lot of information. I know that there's tension. I know if he pulls it back, he's going to probably step shorter. If he pushes it forward, he's going to lean and fall over a little bit. And so I'm gathering information like a detective, with everything I do. And then I'll just pick up the foot, right, from the cannon, and I set it on the pad. And he might step off right away. He might put his foot down and just stand there, take a big breath. He might step on it and walk off. And those are all okay. So this is if there's a hard part for people to get used to, is that it's not training. You don't want to make your horse stand. If he has to walk off, he's out of balance. Let him walk off, right? That's a piece of information. Wow, my horse fell forward, or my horse wasn't sure, or he slid it sideways, or he pushed it forward, or he stepped off to the right. And then I just walk a circle, I give him a moment, and I come back and I repeat that. And typically, like maybe once or twice I'll do that, and then he'll put the foot down and I step back. I give him space and I let him feel this. And you'll see, like I said, breathing changes 3 to 10 seconds. Might be a big blowout, might be a lick and chew, might be an eye blink, might be just standing there very quietly assessing, and then a breath. And then I'll let them stand on it for maybe 30 seconds, maybe, depends on the horse. If he walks off, I let him walk off, and I take him for a walk. I walk maybe a 10-meter circle, and I come back and I'll do the same foot like 2 or 3 times, because I'm saying, this is what we're doing here. And the second time, have you ever noticed, like, you do something the first time and it's great, and then the second time you're thinking about it and you're like, you can't do it? So it's not unusual the second time I go to pick up the foot that it's like they push it or pull it, or like, oh, I don't know how to do it. No problem. Gathering information. Think of it like Sherlock Holmes. Wow, this time he's not sure. Okay, no problem. Take him for a walk, come back, do it again. So I start with front feet because it's safer. I don't know the horse. I typically start with the left front because they're used to us being there. Then I'll go to the right front, see how that's going. Things are quiet, might go to a hind foot, or I might come back and do both front feet. So at that point, now I'm interacting with the horse and he's showing me, like, I don't want my right front, please do my left front. Or I had one horse, this was in Holland, very interesting horse. She was the one who had to always be alert and, like constantly vigilant. And she was not sure about the pad. She kind of stepped back. So I took the rider off and I took her, and it took me about 10 minutes to just touch the pad next to her left front. And then I picked up her foot, and it only, like, maybe a half an inch of her hoof was on the pad, maybe. And she stood there for a moment and she walked off. And when she came back, she brought her left hind leg to me. And I was like, okay, this horse wants her left hind leg. So I picked it up, I put it on the pad. She stood there, big breath, really enjoyed it. I think I maybe did that a couple times, put the rider back on. We did the riding lesson. Next day, she walks in. I could do every single foot. She looked like a pleasure horse. She dropped her neck right down, walk, trot, canter, didn't have to be vigilant. I mean, it was astounding. But I let her show me, hey, you got it. So they'll push the pads around. They'll push them back. They'll step off or they'll step on. I don't ask them to step on the pads because they move too easy. So I want to place their foot on the pad, but I'm also gathering all that information when I do it. So I'm feeling light, heavy, soft, easy, stiff, no elbow, shoulder movement, how it's going to feel. If the legs are really stiff, of course it's going to be an alert. If the leg comes up soft, I can feel that relaxation in the shoulder. So the first time they might kick and I let go. I'm not there to force you. If you don't want it, we're not doing it, right? But then I'll ask again, and then it's typical that once the back foot gets on a pad the first time, the next time they're like, oh yeah, yes, I think I'll help you here. And they'll start to pick up their foot for me, right? So it's, it's a bell curve that the typical horse, takes to it, really enjoys it. I've had a few horses, like neurologic horses, you have to be very careful because if they're active neurologic, they're already unstable and you don't want to make them more unstable. It can make them really panicky. So, if there's any kind of injury or illness, I always tell people to check with the vet. But like after a horse has been treated for EPM, Surefoot's a great way to help them get back. I have people that have had EPM horses and get Surefoot and they're back to competing second level. So, one woman, she has an old jumper, a mare, and she doesn't jump her anymore, but the mare wants a hard pat under the right front foot every single day for a year. She came to me. My horse only wants this under the right. I tried the left, it won't do it. It wants it under the right foot every single day. I'm like, fine, She gets to vote. She gets what she wants. That's our job.
Oh my gosh, this is so great, Wendy. So,
does that answer your question?
oh yes, that's totally answered my question. So my next question, a lot of my clients are rodeo. I run barrels and rope and a lot in the Western performance world.
Oh, wow.
So ground conditions are always an issue, especially in the barrel racing. I very strongly feel like barrel racing is probably one of the top hardest events physically on a horse. And we can, argue that all day between eventing, reining, different things. But so being out on the road with several clients, lasering over the past month, and just kind of being able to be out there in the professional rodeo world, ground conditions always come up because they vary so much all the time. So I'm in my little pea brain, the wheels are going, and I'm like, oh, if we're resetting the nervous system all the time, then we're able to help these horses find their feet. I always talk about with my horses, I'm like, find your feet, just find your feet and do that. But we're also going to be able to reset and help with their soreness, because we're talking about big horses going hard all summer, and the ground will eat you up very quickly.
Yeah, so where I can see, like for barrel racers, what I would suggest is you've got to work with the horse and get them used to the pads. But I think where Surefoot can help is putting horses on pads in stall. But we literally have dressage trainers putting horses on pads in stall before competition, right? And so you need the horse to have a certain level of readiness when he's going to run the barrels. And I had a client, she was an Olympic level speed skater, and her coach would come up to her and he would want to feel her quads like jello. So when she was resting, he wanted the muscles at full rest, because if they're partially contracted, you only have that much more. But if you get them fully relaxed, you have much more power, right? So for the barrel racers, I would see that you would be using this at home. And then when you get to the competition, because the trailering can be really hard on them, and chill them out in the barn. And then, you have your warm up, because they need to perform. But after the performance, you need to be able to get that horse to drop back down and relax and rest, and full deep rest. And if they don't get there, they're not going to recover. And so that's where I can see you using Surefoot before, not just before, but at home, get him used to it so he understands It brings relaxation, figure out the pattern. And then after the trailer ride, when you get there, the morning of the competition, when he's still chilling and you want him relaxed, and then after your competition, put him back on the pads, get him to cool down, relax. So he's going to take a deep breath. He's going to rest better, recover better. And that's the critical piece. That's the thing we tend to forget about, is the recovery phase. And I think that would be a really important phase to use the pads.
I hadn't even thought about the recovery part of, again, even being a PT myself, like I hadn't even gone that far into using it for recovery, because you're right. You've got to have the recovery, and
right.
often recovery is super short,
right.
because we're off to the next one, old son.
Right. But that's where that story about the physical therapist at the endurance ride with 2 to 3 minutes per horse. So, maybe your horse wants to stay longer, but the point is that she didn't have to do a lot to help those horses recover in the rest phase.
Sure.
So anything you can do to help them recover so they're ready to go the next time, and you'll start picking up, you got to pick up their foot, and you're like, wow, you don't want to give me this foot. Now I got to start thinking, did I stress you? What, did you hit yourself? Is there something I should be looking for? Is there a little heat? But it's just another way to check in, and wow, suddenly you wanted pads like all the way around. Now you only want pad over here, or you want a different pad. What's going on? What's changed? Maybe it's just that you want something different, but maybe there's something else. And so if we can catch it faster, we can do something about it. But if we don't, we could be heading down a bad road.
So many Oh, mind bombs, all this fire coming out. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So, one of the things I'm working on is creating Surefoot practitioners,
Okay.
physical therapists, professionals. So this is for professionals, physical therapists, massage therapists, trainers, farriers, so that, because you have skills, and Surefoot's another skill in your toolbox. And like, I have a woman that just, she just texted me, and she's got a horse that's had a lot of trauma, and she's tried a lot of things, and she wants to know if Surefoot can help. And my first thought is, who's close to her I can send to her? Because this is a complicated case. And while I can just tell her, well, just see what happens, it'd be really nice for her to have support. So
Sure.
I'm looking for professionals that want to become Surefoot practitioners and add it to your toolkit. And at the same time, every pair of pads comes with a DVD, so that the lay person, the owner, can watch the DVD or go to my YouTube channel, or it's on my website, watch the quick start guide, and go out and start making a difference to their horse. So, it's simple, but there's some, precautions that you want to be aware of. Safety is always key. I'm a little crazy about safety because, it is a large animal, and on that bell curve, I've had a couple horses that have had really adverse reactions, but I picked, no one got hurt, but I approached them and they were already blowing backwards. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to stick a pad under your foot. Right. I mean, it's exactly. And I just had one up in Canada. Actually, we videoed it, and I'm going to post that video on my YouTube channel, because people need to see not all horses are going to go to this right away. How do I approach the horse that's a little anxious or nervous or not sure? But that's where having trained professionals who are used to handling horses can help with those cases. The average horse, the average home-owned horse is like, your horse, what he's like. And if you follow the safety rules, everything should be okay. It's really learning to be a good observer is a big piece of this.
Sure. Yes. And as a PT, you get crazy in your observation and your details.
Yeah, it's great. Love it.
With people. So, so we'll kind of finish up the conversation here, and then I want to chat with you a little bit more
Okay.
after we get done here with our podcast today. So
I just was going to say that you can find them at murdochmethod.com.
that's exactly what I was going to ask you.
Yep. And
okay.
It's spelled with an H, MURDOCH.com. Or
Okay.
Surefoot Equine. You can just put in SurefootEquine.com and you'll get there. And I'm on Facebook, Murdoch Method on Facebook, Surefoot Equine on Facebook, and my YouTube channel is Murdoch Method.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your enlightenment today, and I hope it helps others as much as I've enjoyed it, because I'm just PT nerding out here and horse nerding out. I'm like, oh, because I was kind of when I found you, I was like, oh, the PT nerd in me is like, this is really cool, and then the kind of the old school, I'm sitting here kind of going,
I don't blame
know.
you for being skeptical. If someone had walked up to me and told me this, I would be very skeptical. I'm a scientist by training, and I really wish that we understood exactly how it works. And at this point, we have plenty of evidence that it is working. We just don't understand all the neurochemical responses that we're looking at. But yeah, and for me, it's it's getting credibility in the veterinary world. I'm actually going to be at AAP in Denver with a booth, because I have like so many veterinarians now that are contacting me that are using Surefoot because of Colorado State University. So that's been a big help in getting the word out.
That is awesome. That's a big step for you. That's so exciting. Oh my goodness. Just yes, like you're just like I'm like, oh, we need to be friends, because I'm like so on the same page here, because I'm like, oh, but yeah, great. So thank you so much for just imparting all this knowledge, and I hope to have you on the podcast again here on Rider's Edge.
I'd love to do that.
So, yes, thank you so much, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Rider's Edge podcast today. We appreciate your time and attention. Thank you for always helping us move the conversation forward. If you liked today's podcast, please help us keep the conversations going by subscribing to this podcast and consider leaving us a review so others can find us and join in on the conversations. You can also find more information by checking us out on our social media channels, including Facebook at Riders Edge Therapy and Wellness, Instagram at Riders Edge Therapy, and our website, www.ridersedgetherapy.com. It is there that you can book a consult for either you or your horse. Thank you, and as always, we will see you down the road.